It's a real pleasure to be here today. As Jonathan said, we first met 22 years ago when I walked in for an interview for a vascular research post, and my life has changed immeasurably since then. You might be wondering why I'm showing you a picture of me stood under a mountain with the title, "This is me, this is who I am." Well, this is me, this is who I am. I'm a mother of 2 children, 15 and 13. I'm a musician, I'm a wife, I'm a former vascular surgeon. I stopped being a vascular surgeon about 18 months ago. And I'm currently clinical director for our NHS at Home service, which is a virtual ward programme within Bristol, North Somerset and South Gloucestershire, and I've led that for the last 4 years. So I did that alongside being a vascular surgeon for a period. And I also have my own business, coaching and training people in healthcare. I'm Rebecca Winterborn, Bex, never Becky. Don't like being called Becky. We had a dog called Becky once. Doesn't sit right with me to be Becky, so I'm Bex. And I became a vascular consultant in 2012. I loved it, absolutely loved my training. Loved being a vascular surgeon. And then in November 2013, one of my anaesthetic colleagues, friend of a friend as well, got knocked off his bike. And I was the vascular surgeon on call. And I received a phone call from my friend to say, "Oh, my best friend's come off his bike, he's fractured his pelvis, I need to go and be where he is." I was like, absolutely, finish up what you need to do, go. Didn't really think anything more of it. 3 hours later, I had a phone call. "We need you in theatre now, we need you in Theatre 5 now." Bristol worked on split sites. I was in one hospital. The trauma went to the other hospital across the city. And I remember driving to this sort of double roundabout outside the hospital, turning right, arriving in the changing rooms, getting changed, walking into the theatre. Theatre room, half the size of this room, wall to wall anaesthetists. Was obviously on the operating table. There was already an orthopaedic surgeon there, a general surgeon there. I don't know how many anaesthetists and other people were in the room. Little old me, and was about 6'4", about 2 foot wide and about 2 foot deep. The first thing I needed was a stool to stand on to actually get into his abdomen. Anyway, we spent 8 hours trying to save his life. I called colleagues. We were getting radiology kit brought over by taxi. I remember sitting astride him on the theatre operating table as I was pushed into what was neuroradiology suite for us to try something else. What else could we do to save his life? And I went home at 2 o'clock in the morning, didn't sleep. Got up the next day, went to work, and I think I had a hernia list or something in the afternoon, and the anaesthetist said to me, "You okay?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I was on call yesterday and I had this horrible case. You probably know him, and then I had a phone call from the head of ICU to tell me that he had died." And I remember just feeling pretty numb. I didn't really know how I should feel. And the head of ICU sort of said, "Are you okay? Will you be okay?" Yeah, I'll be fine. And then the next week was the Vascular Society, and I remember one of the first presentations, it was one of the first presentations on Reboa, and how you could stick a stent up and, stop bleeding. And there was an amazing presentation from Professor Sir David Nott, from the operating theatre in Syria. And just thinking, oh my God, this is, it was just too much. And I was sat next to my registrar, whose best friend it was. And my colleagues were great, but no one really talked about it. And I was in a completely different hospital. I worked in Bath at the time, so we were building our network. And I was, supporting, leading, building that network. And I didn't have that real sense of camaraderie. I didn't have that sense of support and community. Why am I telling you this? Why is that important? Because I think me standing here telling you this story is one of the attributes of what makes a good leader. The fact that I'm willing to stand here, share my heart, share my life, hopefully not overshare. It's not about oversharing. I hope it gives you a sense of who I am. This is me, this is who I am. And by knowing that this is me and this is who I am, I hope that I'm then building trust with you in this room. We've heard about other Venn diagrams, we've heard about other numbers of C's for resilience, the number of C's for this, the number of C's for that. This is my C's for leadership. You can Google it and there'll be 5 C's and there'll be 7 C's and there'll be 9 C's. But I think leadership is about courage. And not just courage, but courageous curiosity. The ability to be interested, the ability to be curious, the ability to show one's naivety. It's okay to not know all the answers. Because what that does is create that psychological safety. We heard earlier about the WHO safety checklist and the importance of that. There are some places I know where as part of that they all also do a bit of a well-being check. You go around the room. I mean, how different would it have been for me? I had a daughter who had terrible migraines, lots of health problems. If at the start of an operating list I'd been able to go, yeah, she's not been very well. So if my phone rings, if someone could just answer it and let you know, how different would it be if I could have shown up as a surgeon, but also as a mother who had this part that was secretly worrying about their child, just to have offloaded that at the start of the list with my team. By doing that, I think it fosters teamwork. It shows us that it's okay to make mistakes, to take risks, to innovate, share ideas, and then we can embrace the change together. I think it's also about communication, but compassionate communication. So not the hashtag be kind, but a really truthful, clear, respectful, open and honest relationship with your peers, with your patients, with their carers. Being really mindful and recognising, and this is the real power of a trauma-informed approach, that we recognise that everyone comes with their own stuff. We don't know what that stuff is. When our patient walks into the operating theatre, walks into clinic, we don't know what's just happened, the stress they've had trying to park their car, the fact that they've had to leave their child or their grandchildren to get in that room. They don't know what they've brought into that room. So just being cognizant of that and accepting that. Devoted listening. Time's tricky, isn't it? We often don't have time, but being able to devotedly listen to people. Revere, really listen, receive the information, respond, review it, check the understanding. These are all things I believe make a good leader. Connection and community. We've heard this again already this morning, this afternoon. Building authentic relationships, trust. For me, it's a lot about trust. Belonging is a really big thing. You know, that lack of a nursery, that lack of a space to go for handover. Like, how does that help us to feel a part of a team and wanted by our organisations? When we have those things, we have that sense of belonging, we have that support, and that's what allows a shift in culture. Celebrating success. We're not great at that, are we? We're really not. We'd much rather talk about all the things that have gone wrong and learn from the things that have gone wrong. How about we start learning from the things that go well and relationships that have been built, and really see the positive impact that that can have on our well-being. And that in turn will increase our fruitfulness. I don't like the word productivity. We're not manufacturers. We don't, package up things. It's not the Industrial Revolution. But fruitfulness, let's take from nature and seasonality. Collaboration, that brings in creativity, a collective wisdom. We heard Professor Derek Alderson describe earlier about those patients who are destined to make it through. Contribution, passion, joy. Maybe it's okay. Maybe it's okay that if you really love your job, that's what you do, because then when you do get home, even if you haven't spent time with your family, you arrive home feeling energized, feeling excited about what you do, because it's aligned with your values, it's aligned with your vision. And for me, I think what I've learned is that the golden thread for all of these things is the power of coaching. We heard about that DeBakey lecture earlier on, describing professional musicians, professional sports people. They all have coaches as well, right? Why don't we have coaches? Atul Gawande wrote a fantastic article in the New Yorker several years about the power of coaching, both in the operating theatre, but also outside. And that facilitates personal growth, allows you to identify your talents, really hone in on them. And I feel that that's what I've done. I've recognised my talents over my 11 years of being a consultant vascular surgeon. I've dipped my toe into various leadership roles alongside. I was lucky enough to do them alongside operating. And I then was given this opportunity at the start of the pandemic to develop a service and to keep nurturing that, to keep finding the stakeholders and speak to them and develop it into what it is now. I had a real vision. As a team, we had a vision. And that allows us to transform, and that creates a ripple effect. The art or science of medicine. I think leadership, our ability to evolve and change, is much more about intuition. It's about recognizing who we are as human beings and how we interact with each other. And if we're respectful and kind, that's what makes a good leader for me. And yes, you can learn, you can go on courses. I've done one management course in my time, the Keel management course, back in 2011 when my poor son was 8 weeks old, because I had to have it as a line on my CV. Everything I've done since then is through observation and just being curious. And I think when we do that, we come from our heart, we can create belief amongst others, we can let go of everything else. And I hope that all of this then leads to a positive paradigm shift in our organisations, allows us to move towards hope and away from fear, and provides an inclusive, equitable healthcare with sustainability and sustainable change. Thank you.
Always humble when I hear you talk, Rebecca. Right, has anybody got any talks? That's a pretty tricky one to follow, isn't it? I can't even think of a question. Yeah.
How would you look to develop your younger colleagues to become leaders? Because I agree with in terms of the leadership courses. Thank you. I was just asking how to develop your younger colleagues as leaders, because I agree with you that we have leadership courses back in the day when it's a requirement for applications, when certainly for ARCPs or CCT, you get a leadership course, but it's very much almost like learning how structures work, and which has its place, as we've said already today, but how to develop those soft skills of being an actual sort of leader with a vision and engaging people.
So I think the first thing to say is that we're all leaders at any time. You don't have to have a title, clinical lead or leader or director, to be a leader. I think by virtue of the fact that you are a surgeon and you work with other people, you have the opportunity to lead and role model. And for me, it's that role modeling behaviour that you can do. And then by displaying that to the people you work with, you will start to notice the people who have that gift. It's not necessarily a really tangible thing, but you will just start to notice. There'll be some people who come up to you and say, oh, I want to be in leadership. Okay, what does that mean? If you'd spoken to me 10 years ago, would I have said that I want to be doing what I was doing now? No, I found something that I enjoyed. I found that passion. I kept the other plates spinning, and I decided to spend a bit more time spinning this plate. I was probably guilty of trying to spin the others all at the same time as well. But I think it's just it's something inside. And I think when you're passionate about something and you have a vision, you can then lead people towards that. And I think when you start to see that in residents, it's just nurturing them, just role modelling and sharing with them that it's okay for them to be who they want to be. Bit woolly, I know, but it's true.
Yeah. Rebecca, thank you for a wonderful presentation, for finishing up with a positive outlook. You mentioned this sense of belonging in your talk, and I wonder whether this is harder to implement, given that the teams these days are just bigger. And most of us are trained under the firm structure, which ticked a lot of boxes because people knew each other, people sort of understood each other. If someone was having issues, it was obvious because you knew someone just so well. How do you think we can implement this sort of caring about the team as a whole when the team is so much larger these days?
So I think there's probably some practical things. There's infrastructure things in terms of organisationally, what we can do. Within the teams themselves, I think it's role modelling that behaviour that allows people to feel nurtured, that allows people to speak up, that allow people to share, it's the basics, isn't it, of going for a coffee. That's really a simple thing to do, but we're so busy all the time and we can't do it because X, Y, Z. So I think there's the systemic change within organisations, within our teams, those times to allow people to show up as themselves, to share when things haven't gone well. We're talking about dealing with trauma. I now kind of built in within our local resident boot camps spaces for people to talk about trauma. But I think as surgeons, it's hearing our peers, hearing senior clinicians express how it makes them feel, so that it's okay for you to feel that way, because it's when we squash down those emotions that we then do suffer with burnout, and we suffer with PTSD, which is what happened to me. I think there's different layers, but ultimately role modelling as individuals and showing up as ourselves, I think, is a small step to that sense of belonging and a shared vision and shared values. Doing that work.
You're very coherent and you're very credible. How optimistic are you that this sort of behaviour could become pervasive in the NHS or in any of the
good question.
Any of the countries that are represented here today?
I am optimistic. I think there's a real opportunity. I think back up to my passion for being a surgeon, and I think about my passion in what I do now. It's that ripple effect. It only takes one of you to go back and start having some of these conversations for it to start to ripple. And if me coming and standing here today and sharing this means that the 25 people around this room all go back to their organisation and show up in a slightly different way, how many people do you talk to every day? How many people are with you in theatre, in your clinic, in your department? That all has a ripple effect out. And when we work together, when we collaborate, we are so much stronger. It's a bit like the resilience thing. Resilience is between us. It takes a village to raise a family, as they say. It's that if we do it together, but it's hard as independent, goes back to discussion we were having earlier about this idea that you become an independent practitioner. Actually, when we collaborate, we're just so much stronger.
Derek, you got the final point.
I was going to ask you a question, a simple thing really. Celia says we work with multi-professional, multidisciplinary, big groups of people now. What do you think about team building exercises for that wider team as a kind of leadership task, and how effective have you got any experience of doing that? I take my team to the Greyhound Stadium in Birmingham. Was a kind of odd sort of thing to do, but some people seem to really love it. Do you think team building is worth it?
I think there's different ways, aren't there? There's the activities that we can do together that just show that we're human, which is probably going to the race, the greyhound racing, going to the JVRG thing, and actually showing that we have a family, we do other stuff outside of being a surgeon. But I think as the teams get bigger, and I certainly noticed this with my department, as it got bigger and bigger and bigger, you then get factions. If you can bring the team together around a really clear vision and really clear values, it does start to shift that, because it gets back to that, we're all in this together. But it's harder the bigger you get. And there'll always be someone who's got a different opinion. But again, it goes back to that, being able to listen, really listen to that person, really, get to the bottom of the difference, and then find a way that allows that to be part of the ongoing vision and jigsaw.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Bex, that was brilliant. Thank you.